Welcome back to the Quiet Leadership Lab. Thanks for joining me today, for tuning into my space. You could be anywhere else, but you are here, and I do not take that lightly at all. My name is Shirley Brooks, a mom, wife, and quiet leader who is also an author, future of work strategist, fractional COO, coach, and business advisor who founded YSWS Growth Firm. And if you're joining me for the first time, I work with quiet, discerning leaders, especially women in corporate environments or who are entrepreneurs that are often carrying more than their title, pay, or visibility reflects. And this space is for the woman who is steady, thoughtful, preventative, and highly competent, but who is tired of watching visible leadership get rewarded more easily than durable leadership. And if you've ever been the one people call when things are messy, but not always the one they call a leader, this podcast is for you. If you've ever left a meeting thinking the right thing to say after it was over, this podcast is for you. And if you've ever quietly fixed something that would have cost your team or your client a lot of money or reputation, and no one really saw it, this podcast is for you. Now, well, before I even get into that, two things because something's different. I'm wearing my glasses today and my lipstick color, which I'm realizing may not have been the best choice, but here we are. I was kind of just trying to go with the, sort of kind of 80s vibe that this shirt is giving, but I don't know. Y'all tell me in the comments, is the lipstick working? The glasses, though, the glasses. I had a Nitro cold vanilla cream cold brew earlier, and right when I finished like writing my notes for this show today, like all the energy just started draining out of my body, and I could feel it in my eyes. And so I figured if maybe I wear my glasses, that might help. So hi glasses. And yes, they are real glasses. They are actually I mostly wear them for driving, not necessarily for anything else, just for driving. But they're okay as long as I kind of like stay this far back from the computer. So here we go. Anyway, so now if you were here for the last episode, first of all, thank you for being back again. But if you were here for the last episode, then you know we talked about the strengths of quiet leadership and what those strengths produce for organizations and why they are so often overlooked, even when the value is very real. Today, I want to build directly on what we did in episode 2. In that episode, we talked about the value of quiet leadership. And today, I want to talk about the language of quiet leadership, because one of the biggest reasons we as quiet leaders stay under recognized, and I hope you heard me say under recognized, is not that we are not contributing. It is that we are often not naming our contribution clearly enough for systems that already struggle to see us. And I want to say this up front. I teach more about this fully in my book 1 of my Quiet Leadership series, the hidden cost, excuse me, of quiet leadership, the hidden cost of quiet leadership. Because this is not just a communication issue, it is deeply tied to what I call the visibility trap, the cost ceiling, and the way organizations misread quiet, high judgment leadership. So let's go ahead and get into the slides. I am going to transition right here and see you in a few seconds. Okay, so like I said, we're going to get into the slides. And for today's Quiet Leadership Lab, or what I'm starting to like to call pod lesson, we're going to talk about I statements for quiet leaders and how to name what you actually did without performing different or performing leadership, I like to say, but definitely by honoring your personality. So on this first slide, the core idea is simple. You are doing the work, but you're not naming the work. And this is such a common pattern for quiet leaders, and especially for women in corporate settings, because many of us have been socialized to soften our authority. We say things like, I just helped, or the team did it. Oh, it was nothing. Oh, I only cleaned it up. It's like when we get a compliment and we're like, oh, this old thing. And the problem is not that those statements are humble. The problem is that in a visibility-driven environment, those statements erase evidence. And I really want to sit with that word for a second, evidence. Because what promotion systems, performance reviews, and leadership pipelines often reward is not merely contribution. They reward documented, legible contribution. So when you use minimizing language around work that required judgment, discernment, clarification, prevention, or stabilization, leadership does not necessarily fill in the blanks in your favor. What they may hear instead is no clear ownership, no visible leadership, no strategic contribution, maybe just support. And that is how women like us who are doing real leadership work end up being described as helpful, dependable, great team players, which none of that is bad, but somehow that leads to the perception that we're still not ready for the next level. And that is why this episode matters, because the issue is not that your contribution is small. The issue is that your language may be shrinking it. All right, let's go to the next. Now, on the second slide here, I want to talk about why so many women in corporate deflect credit. For a lot of us, this starts with good intentions. We want to be collaborative. We want to elevate the team. We don't want to sound arrogant. We don't want to take credit for something that was shared at work. And honestly, many of us quiet leaders are deeply relational, so it feels natural to talk about success in collaborative terms. But here's the problem. In book 1 of my Quiet Leadership series, I talk about how quiet leaders often assume the work will speak for itself and how dangerous that assumption can be in systems where visibility equals value. If your manager does not deeply understand your role, if your work is preventative, if you tend to catch things before they become visible, or if you are often the person making other people look polished, raising my hand here, then the work does not necessarily speak for itself. In many cases, it disappears into everyone else's success. And that is especially true when you say things like, my team did great work, without also naming what you specifically led, designed, clarified, prevented, or stabilized. Because in a healthy culture, collaboration is a strength. But in an immature system, collaboration without self-definition gets misread as a lack of ownership. And that is one of the things I want my listeners to really hear in this episode. Using an I statement is not the opposite of being collaborative. It is how you make your contribution legible inside collaboration. And for those of you who may not be able to see the slides because you're listening, I actually want to tell you what this slide says specifically. And of course, you can always get the link to the deck in the show notes. And when you're at home or have some time where you can actually look at this, it's free. You can just click on it, see it for yourself. But I want to speak specifically to why women in corporate deflect credit. We are taught to be collaborative, not self-promotional. We assume good work will speak for itself. We forget that visibility gaps, cost promotions, pay, and career security are impacted by how we show up, by how we speak up for ourselves. In a visibility-driven system, my team did great work can be heard as I did not have a meaningful role. So I really wanted to to say what's on this slide specifically because I want you to know what happens when you don't speak up for yourself. And just in case you're not able to look at this because you're listening and can't see it right now, it was really important for me to know, for you to know what this slide says. All right, so going to the next. All right. So let's actually work through what is an I statement, how to use this as a tool. An I statement is not bragging. It is not performance theater. It is not pretending you did everything alone. An I statement is simply a clear sentence that tells the truth about your role in the work. The simplest formula is this: I plus a strong verb plus specific contribution plus business impact. So instead of vague language, you use leadership verbs like I led, I designed, I prevented, I clarified, I built, I documented, I stabilized. And then you connect that to something observable like reduced work, faster onboarding, fewer errors, better decision quality, less confusion, lower risk, preserved knowledge, better execution. This is one of the reasons the journal I created, Quiet Leadership Journal, 90 Days of Discernment, Visibility, and Authority for Women Who Lead Without the Noise, matters so much because the daily prompts in the journal are already training this exact muscle. The prompts ask, what contribution did I make visible today? What I statement did I use? Or will I use? And what is today's documented win? And the language it gives you is very explicit. I led, I designed, I prevented, I clarified, and you fill in the blanks. The way I designed it was not accidental. I designed it to rewire your brain, to lock in those new neural pathways. That is a discernment to visibility practice. So, if you need a few examples, here are some that fit quiet leaders like us really well. I led the design of our onboarding process, which reduced confusion and improved ramp time. I clarified the decision path so the team could execute without duplicating work. I prevented a downstream issue by raising a risk before the plan was finalized. I documented a process that preserved critical institutional knowledge during transition. So tell me, do you hear the difference? These statements are not inflated. They are 100% accurate, and they name contribution in a way a system can actually recognize. So let's go on to the next slide. We're on slide 4 if you are following along online, or if you decide to go back and something here stands out for you, we're at slide 4. So the 4th slide is where I think a lot of quiet leaders finally exhale, because this is where we talk about invisible labor and how we can turn it into promotable language. One of the reasons we as quiet leaders struggle with self-advocacy is that so much of what we do does not look dramatic, period. We prevent the issue before it becomes a crisis. We hold context that stops the team from repeating a mistake. We clarify what leadership meant when everyone else leaves the meeting confused. And let me tell you, I remember doing that so much when I was in corporate. But we also catch the flaw in the proposal before it gets to the client. We smooth something out before it becomes expensive. Again, story of my life in corporate and as an entrepreneur. Only reason why I can tell you any of this or put words to any of it. And because nothing big happened, we think maybe there was nothing to name. But that is exactly the trap. Prevention is leadership. Hear me again. Prevention is leadership. Clarification is leadership. Stabilization is leadership. Holding context is also leadership. So when I say translate invisible labor into promotable language, what I mean is this. If you caught an issue before it escalated, say, I caught a risk early and prevented a downstream problem. If you were the person remembering all the moving parts and keeping the team from repeating history, say that. I preserved context that helped the team avoid repeating a previous mistake. If a project was unclear and you turned ambiguity into execution, say that. I translated unclear direction into a process the team could actually move on. That is not ego. That is documentation. And that is an important distinction for us quiet leaders, because so many of us have an internal resistance to language that feels self-focused, right? But documentation is not vanity. Documentation is how you make your leadership visible enough to be valued. Let me say that again. This is not bragging. It is evidence. You are not inflating your contribution. You are documenting how judgment prevention and stabilization created business value. If you don't get anything else from this, get that. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, we're almost done, by the way. We're talking about now how you can use the journal to make this a daily habit. But if you happen to not have the journal, you can still use these prompts to help this become a daily habit. So let's connect this because I do not just want this to be something you hear and agree with. I want it to become a practice. I want you to not only rewire your brain, but make the new good habit stick. So one of the most powerful things about the journal is that it turns visibility into a repeatable leadership habit. Instead of waiting until review season and trying to remember everything you did, you build a record in real time. You answer, what contribution did I make visibly today? What I statement did I use or need to use? What is today's documented win? Did I name something I led, designed, prevented, or clarified? That matters because quiet leaders often wait until a high stakes conversation to try to show their value or explain their value. And by then, the pressure is high, oxygen to the brain is low, the examples are fuzzy, the nervous system is already activated. But if you've been practicing one sentence at a time, one documented win at a time, then your performance review, your one-on-one, your promotion conversation, and even your resume begin to sound different. So the move here is very simple. Look back at the last 30 days of your work and write 3 I statements, not aspirational ones, real ones. I know you have them. What did you lead? What did you clarify? What did you prevent? And what did you stabilize? What did you build that other people are now benefiting from, but may no longer consciously see? And trust me, they're not doing it to be mean. It's the way that the brain, it's the way the brain works. So it's important that you think about things like that and you document it because your discernment becomes visible when you stop making your contribution sound accidental. All right, we're finishing up here. If this conversation is hitting something deep for you, I want you to hear me clearly. You do not need to become a louder person to become more visible. You do not need to perform a different personality. You do not need to become the most dominant voice in the room. What you need is a truer language for the leadership you are already practicing. And I teach these ideas more fully in book 1 of my Quiet Leadership series, The Hidden Cost of Quiet Leadership, especially the visibility trap and the cost ceiling, and the deeper frameworks that explain why quiet leaders get misread in the first place. And if this feels like a practice, what we did today, if it feels like a practice that would serve you, not just something you understand intellectually, but something you want to build into how you lead, or if you have a team member that you lead and you want to build this into how they lead, then that is exactly why I created the journal. 90 Days of Discernment, Visibility, and Authority for Women Who Lead Without the Noise. The journal is there to help you turn these ideas into habit through daily documentation, stronger self-language, and a more visible record of your actual leadership. And if you would like to have support as you work through the journal, reach out to me for support one-on-one. I am always here to help. There's contact details, I'm sure, somewhere in the show notes, I'm sure. So before you leave this episode here, I want you to do one thing. I want you to actually, you could count it as 1 or 3. I don't know. But write down 3 I statements from your real work and then use one this week in a one-on-one, in an email, in a weekly update, or in your own notes if that is where you need to begin. And if you're feeling brave, drop one of the I statements in the comments so others can have examples of how to articulate their value and their contributions as quiet leaders. And I just want you to remember that it's okay to start small if you need to. But the main thing is to start. That's usually what gets in all of our way, is just the starting. So just start. Because the goal is not to become more performative. The goal is to become more legible to the rooms that are already benefiting from your judgment. And if you're the kind of leader who catches what others miss, studies things before they break, and quietly carries context that keeps the work moving, then I want you to know this: your work counts, even when it's not loud. Your leadership is real, even when it's not theatrical. And your discernment deserves language strong enough to be seen. So for now, I'm grateful you're here. You're not imagining the weight you carry. You're not overreacting to what you've lived. And you are absolutely not the only one. You don't need to be a louder leader, but you do deserve rooms, roles, and relationships that recognize what you see and what you hold. Thank you for spending this time with me today and for being here with me again in the Quiet Leadership Lab. I'm glad you're here, and I'll see you on the next one.